hi everyone. Very good to see people in a breakout session and in real life. So good to see you all. We're going to talk about healthcare. And the fact that we're all here, we can also do some real hand raising, and not only on Teams. So I wanted to start asking you, who all here in the room is working in healthcare? Please raise your hand. In real life? A couple of you, that's great. Kind of. What does... It's a little bit healthcare-like. We do need to work together with health insurance and healthcare and all the players, right? Health. Who is working in health? Good, okay. We are going to talk about digital transformation in healthcare. Sorry, it's not going to be a technical talk. My passion is about, if we do have that technology, how can we bring it into practice? So that's what I'm going to talk about today. I only have 30 minutes, and I'm very passionate about the topic. So let's see how far we will get. Maybe very short about myself. I studied here in Eindhoven, in the backyard of this campus or the other campus. I studied biomedical engineering. After that, I worked as a data scientist in IT and in, health insurance, health. And now I'm working at Philips. I started as a clinical data scientist, and currently I'm part of the Philips Global Data&AI Center of Excellence team, working on data&AI partnerships. And for me, in my full career, healthcare is one of the main things. And for me, healthcare and innovation, one of the things that strikes me is why healthcare is different. And that's what I wanted to discuss with you today. To start with, let's take a look at healthcare and where we're standing today. Because healthcare is quite a complicated topic, and we are not in a very easy spot. There are a few trends that we do see. So the first one is that we do have an aging population. So we all are part of healthcare, of course, or what we do see in the population of healthcare, it's aging, and with aging population, you also do see more complicated diagnoses, so more complicated diseases. And next to that, we do see that there's a staff shortage. So on one hand, we have more patients, more complicated patients, and on the other hand, we do have less staff to take care of those people. And at the same time, we do see a rise in costs. So also more complicated diseases, more higher costs. So those are three trends that we do see really on healthcare. And then the fourth one, I think it's very interesting also seeing in digital transformation that we do experience healthcare very different. So also with all the wearables that we have, with all the information that is available, we do see ourselves as patients or as people as part of healthcare, as experts of our own health. Thereby, we also do have a different relationship with our healthcare providers, because we do search, before we go to the doctor, I think we all do, search first about, hey, what might it be? And then we go to the doctor and we ask, hey, we think this might be it. Do you think that's correct? At the same time, I have a Fitbit myself, maybe some of you as well. We also keep track of our health every day. So those four things make at least a transformation in healthcare necessary. And I think this one is also very interesting. So we do see that there's an exponential growth in healthcare data. So this we can see also as an opportunity. So research also find out that in 2025, the amount of healthcare data is expected to grow by 36% per year. And indeed, if we talk about healthcare or health, on one hand, we have the professional health, so data in the hospital, but we also talk about healthcare at home. So you have the data in the hospital, but also data outside of the hospital, also in the second line. So you do have a full field of different data sources growing exponentially. So if you have the data, and if you have those challenges of healthcare, well, you would say 1 and 1 is 2, but still currently we do see some disbalance in that. So let's take one step back and take a look at other industries, and how other industries are handling so much data, or what do they do with that? I always like to take one step back and take a look at those big companies that came up during the last decade of years. So if you look to Uber is a very big company, one of the largest taxi companies in the full world, a taxi company that doesn't own any cars. If you look at Netflix, Netflix is the world's largest movie provider, though they don't own any cinema. If you look to Airbnb, one of the world's largest hotel companies, they don't own any property. Which for me is very interesting if you look to the digital transformation, because what do all those companies have in common? They have data as their foundation. So they start with data, they end with data. And from that data, they create an experience. If you take a look in healthcare, you also see a few examples, some few new entrants in healthcare, also with data as their foundation. So for example, Amazon. Amazon has a lot of projects in healthcare. One of the projects, for example, is Amazon Care. Amazon Care is a service that you as a healthcare or as a person in need of healthcare can do search on, and you can directly get in contact with a clinician. So you don't need to wait for an appointment. You can just go there and ask an expert. So you don't need to go to Google, search in the full world of information. Directly you get in contact with an expert. If you look to Apple, Apple on their Health Watch has an FDA-approved algorithm for atrial fibrillation, so for heart disease detection. And then if you look to Google, I already told you about my Fitbit. In 2019, Google bought Fitbit. Fitbit is, of course, a watch. But if you would ask me, I don't think that Google bought Fitbit because of the watches. Then you have a lot of watches, okay. But I do think that Google bought Fitbit because of the data that they already have and that they are providing on a daily basis. So with buying Fitbit, suddenly Google knows about the health and the lifestyle of global population of people. They know about the sleep cycle, they know about the activity cycle, they know about the heart rate. And with that, I think it's a very interesting point of view that those new entrants take data as their foundation. I always like to bring you to this Lego picture. Might be a little bit strange, but it explains the story a little bit, because data is just a starting point. Just having data is not directly valuable, is not giving us information. If you have data, then you need to first sort it, arrange it, present it visually, before you can explain it with a story. And what is then taking a lot of the time? The first step. If you have data and that big pile of Lego blocks here, and then sort it, that's 80% of the time, especially because that first step is quite often our legacy data. That data we did not collect because we want to explain it with a story. That data we did collect because of administration purposes. If you look to the new entrants that I just described, they did collect the data already with the idea in mind about the story that they want to explain it to. So you do see that they skip that step of that rubbish data, but directly go to the explanation with a story from the sorted data. And that's also, if you look to digital transformation and solutions, you see those two types of solutions. The first one built on legacy data, which we have a lot of, but it's quite messy. And the second one is new devices creating new data that are clean from the start. Sometimes you also see that combination. And that is something that I also want to show you in a few examples. But before that, I think this is also a nice one. So where are we standing now with healthcare? If I speak to a lot of clinicians, they do say, indeed, Ymke, we are in a difficult spot with healthcare. We are drowning in data while we are starving from wisdom. So if they walk around in a hospital, they do see all those piles of data. And what they want to do is to create wisdom. They want to create information out of that. So how can we do that? AI can help. So if we have the data, AI can help us to create information, to create wisdom out of that. But AI is not the solution on itself. So I get quite often a question from people, hey, Ymke, I want to do something with AI. Though AI is just a tool, AI is not the solution. Where AI can help is that pile of information, discuss what is the current workflow, discuss what is the clinical problem, and then see where data and AI can help. And it needs to be part of the workflow, and it can only be as good as the people using it. It's really a supportive tool there. So let's talk about a few examples on how data, so the type 1, type 2 data, and AI can really help in the clinical workflow. This one is from the ICU, intensive care unit. It's one of the departments in the hospital where we have most of the data, because we do real-time monitoring, a lot of tests, a lot of measurements. And in this data, this is typical type 1. So the data is already there. It was not directly created because we want to get more information out of it. It's created also because of administration purposes. So it's a typical type 1 situation. And algorithms already currently can predict when a patient becomes worse. How is that helping? Well, if a patient becomes worse, well, it's not good for the patient, obviously, but also for the clinician. He can better prevent than act on something that is happening, right? So that's a typical example, I think also a lot in the research and academic world seen as a good practice. Then this example, it's called patient flow capacity suite. Also a typical one of type 1, so making use of the legacy data. With this one, we take a look at the logistic flow of a patient throughout the hospital. So data from different departments, different silos, combine that, bring that together, and make a prediction on how the patient will flow through the hospital. Thereby, it can make a more efficient workflow for the patient itself, so really patient-centric, but also with the planning of your clinical staff, you can see, hey, this is where we need to act a little bit more because that's a more complicated person. So that's a typical legacy data, even more complicated than just one department connecting multiple departments. This is typical type 2. So it's a new device as part of the MRI machine. MRI machine is not a very nice experience. You're laying there in a very concise place. And this is a camera, and this camera can watch the patient, and at the same time do breathing detection, and can see whether the trend goes up or down. So thereby also checking the stress of the patient, and then also the clinician can act on that. So it's a typical type 2. This data is really collected for us to give more information, give more wisdom. And this is, we talked about healthcare in hospital, but healthcare is of course also there outside the hospital. So also within the toothbrushes, you can collect the data and give more personalized advice based on the data collected and the AI on top of it. So those are a few examples. But unfortunately, we are not there yet in healthcare. What we do see is that we do have a few examples, but it's not a lot. And what are then the barriers that we do see for digital transformation in healthcare? So this is the results from Philips Future Health Index 2021. And on top, you see the first barrier, difficulties with data management. I already told you about those challenges. Patient flow capacity suite, where we have data from different departments. Well, you have also in hospital different departments. Also, outside the hospital, you have data sources. And even within the departments, you do have different sources. So different systems, different measurements. And that is all different sources that you need to manage in order to get information out of it. So that's that big pile on top of the Lego blocks. Then the next one is directly connected to it. If you do have all those sources, they need to speak the same language in order for them to be combined, which is currently very difficult. And then the last one I like a lot, because the first two are very technical. But only technology is not bringing us the value. If you just have the technology, in these interviews, the clinician said, well, we need to be trained in order to get fully potential out of those digital innovations. Those are three things that came out at the Future Health Index, mainly focusing on the production environment, so the hospital environment. And I did understand that a lot of people also are from research. Maybe a quick question to the audience, who is working in R&D research environment? Yeah, some of you, good to see, because we also have some typical challenges over there. This is a paper about ICU publications. So they did metadata analysis of ICU publications. And what did they check? They did an analysis on the maturity level of the publications and the technology that goes with it. So what you see in the y-axis is the maturity level of the publications we currently have, technology readiness level. Well, on the x-axis you have time, year, and what you do see is that indeed we do have more and more publications, so that's good. It's of course also an interesting field, a lot of people are doing research on it, but we do not see an increase in technology readiness level. And that is something we really would like to do, of course, to bring all the ideas that we have into publication, into implementation and adoption. So from that one single site to multiple sites to really scale. A few things also came out of that research as a reason for that. The first one, only 2% of the reviewed studies analyzed data sets of more than 100,000 patients, which is already not a lot, and also in that research was stated that it's quite often only single site, so not multi-site, not directly at scale. A few reasons for that were especially the privacy on a global level, thereby it's difficult to scale, but also standardization of also the data extracts that we have. It's difficult to share that. The second one, translating models to different institutions, technical differences. So that's also lined out in the previous research, of course, in the interoperability. And the third one, high risk of bias. And I understand that my colleague Arlette van Wis already told you a lot about that, so I will not dive into details about that. So two main things we see in the challenges. On one hand, we do have the technology, we need to implement it, data management, interoperability, and also train people to use it, directly make it part of the workflow. But also if we do the research, we see that we are very good to making proof of concepts, but we would like to scale. So how can we do that? What are the things that we can do to make those steps and to overcome those challenges? To scale AI in healthcare, we do see 4 enabling areas. First one, people and experiences. So as said in that Future Health Index, make it part of the clinical workflow from the start. Train also the potential end user about digital, not only about the solution, but also to trust the data that they work with. In here also a lot design thinking. The second one, data and technology. So it's about data management, data sharing, interoperability. We'll tell more about that in a few seconds. Governance and trust. I think Arlette also covered that in the morning with the data&AI principles. And the last one, partnerships and new business models. Because we can all do all those first 3 things, but still we need to see how we can do that together. If we only can do it on one site, how can we then also do it on other sites and other hospitals? Well, let's first dive into data and technology. If you look to data and technology from Philip's point of view, there are 3 specific items that we are working on. So the first one is working on one platform where the data comes together, but also make sure that that's interoperable, that everybody can make use of it. And the third one, pioneering next generation AI methods, also to support data sharing. And then if we talk about the research data we do have, I think this one is a good one to also discuss with a bigger audience, the FAIR data principles. FAIR is standing for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. This initiative started in 2016 in the US from scientists, where they said we need to work together to share data more openly, to make it findable, to make it accessible, to make it interoperable, make it reusable. And also if you see, for example, in the US, NIH is one of the big funding agencies. They stated 2 months back that starting from 2023, they will make it mandatory for everybody that gets a fund from NIH to make data publicly available. It's a big say. It's easy to say. It's not easy to do. So also, as a reaction on that publication of NIH, a lot of people are now working together to see, okay, how can we then share? What are then the standards that we want to use? But also, how can we overcome those global privacy issues? Because we do see that privacy in every state, also in GDPR, is different interpreted. So those are things that also based on the fair data principles, also based on NIH request. You also see it in Europe quite a lot now ongoing. If you look to some initiatives where Philips is involved, one of them is, for example, the Mimic dataset. The Mimic dataset is an openly available ICU dataset that is freely available for everybody that's doing research. It's available on the VisioNet website, so also to support and to really make people use of the data, and everybody can do their research on. So that's the US example, but US also has some more easy privacy laws for us as researchers. If you look to Europe, there's also an initiative called Gaia-X. It's a drive for digital innovation in Europe. It's not only healthcare, it's also other domains. And what they're doing there is creating on a high European level some requirements on how can we work together to really accelerate innovation. And one of the things that they do there is the Federated Health Data Lake. So if you think about federated learning, it's a new way of sharing data. What you normally do is if you have data, then you as a data scientist go there and you process the data. If so, privacy law is applicable because you touch, you see the data. What is happening here, the data stays on site at different nodes where the data is created from, and instead of bringing a data scientist to the data, you bring the algorithm to the data. And only the trained parameters come back, and you bring the algorithm to another node, another data hub. Trained parameters back, and you bring it to another node. So that is the infrastructure that Gaia-X on a European level is working on. Then another interesting thing ongoing, the synthetic data. Currently it's on top of the hype cycle, so it's really an emerging field. Let's see what we can do with it. But I like the idea. So you do have your original data, and you create a synthetic copy of it with the same pattern in there. With the synthetic data, you can create just a copy, but you can also work on augmenting, growing that data set. So that's also one of the options that you can have there. Well, so far sharing data, but then you just have data from one side. So if you want that, you can also think about partnerships. So how can we then work together? Talk about the privacy, talk about standards on how to share data. So that's where we are working in ecosystems for data and AI in healthcare. A couple of those things ongoing. So one way you have the long-term strategic partnerships, but also integrating third-party AI offerings and a marketplace. So also if there are ideas from somewhere else, integrate it, make that available, create that transparency. So currently we do have a lot of those innovations, quite a lot of individual knowledge. Can we bring that to collective knowledge so it's available for everybody? I want to focus very short, since we're here in Eindhoven today, on long-term strategic partnerships here locally. So we do have a very interesting local ecosystem. It's called the Amtic, Eindhoven Medtech Innovation Center. Maybe some of you have heard of it. Please raise your hand if you know it. Yeah, a few. Nice. Well, for the people that don't know it, it's a collaboration of 5 strategic partners here in the region. So it's a collaboration of Philips, University of Eindhoven, Catharina Hospital, Maxima Medical Center, and Kempenhagen Sleep Center. And what they try to do together is to create a fast track to clinical innovation. With the vision, if we work with 3 different types of partners, so clinical partners, a knowledge institute, an industry partner, we can really have those key ingredients to create that fast track for clinical innovation. One of the examples that is in there is the Health Dot. Health Dot is a wearable, it's a plaster that you put on your chest, and it can measure heart rate and respiratory rate. In 2018, in Catharina Hospital, in the Amtic context, we started a study with 35 professionals, so it was really a big thing, where we measured, or where we worked together with post-surgery patients. They have then a wearable, and with that wearable, they can go home 1 day early because they are remote monitored. So for both the patients, as well as for the clinician, it's a good case. So we started that in 2018, and already right now, sorry, this is in Dutch, I will translate, it's in practice. So you see on the left, as an article from Eindhoven's Dagblad, that Jan had the surgery, was able to go home one day early with that device that was created in that local ecosystem. And on the right, you see also that it helped with the COVID crisis. So also COVID patients were able to go home early while they were remotely monitored by this device. So this is a typical example where working together can really accelerate the time to clinical practice. So, some key takeaways. I see I still have some time. So on one hand, we do have AI as a big promise, but it's just a tool. AI is only there to enable, to help, and to support healthcare providers, and it needs to be implemented in a clinical workflow to really augment the human experience and to integrate it in the workflow. And, well, for me, very important, if we want to do that, if we really want to accelerate the time to clinical practice, we need to work together. So that's my key takeaway. Let's work together to make this world a more healthy and sustainable place.